friends, and welcome to another episode of Booked, a place to explore the realms of creativity. I'm joined today by Joel Glover, author of many, 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 many things. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm very glad to be here too.
I am so sad that the video recording isn't working and people can't enjoy your incredible outfit, which is a hoodie that's shaped like a shark.
This is not a hoodie, it's a onesie. It goes
It's
all
a
the way
onesie! It goes all the way down!
It goes all the way down. Well, look. Hello, everybody out in the internet. Hello, Safi's podcast listeners. I listened to the first episode. We're going to go straight behind the curtain because this is how my brain works. I listened to the first episode of this podcast this week on 1.5 speed because I listen to everything on 1.5 speed. And anybody out there that's doing the same thing, you're going to need to slow it down because I talk at this speed all the time. But there were two things that stood out to me. The first was how enthusiastic Safi was about someone else's writing, which made me feel very envious. And the second was how excited you were that Katie was wearing a skeleton costume. And I was like, I can top that. I might not be able to top her love for the writing, but I've got a shark onesie. I'm putting it on. And then anybody else that joins is going to be ashamed that they didn't wear a costume. It's a costume party. So there we go. That's the intro. Let's crack on.
I love that. Okay, so the first episode, just a bit of context. So the first episode I recorded on the day of Halloween. So she was going to a party, so she dressed up as a skeleton, and then the video didn't work for that either. So that came out in December, and this is coming out in April.
Let's call it National Shark Day.
Amazing. National Shark Day. Amazing.
Call it National Shark Day. Let's move on. Wow! Off with a bang.
Oh my gosh. And as I introduced Joel as author of many, 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 many things, the most recent thing of yours that I've read is The 13th Prince, which was started off with a bang for me because I love it when there's swearing in a book. And it was so sassy and well written and exciting. There was so much going on. And you are very good at putting a lot of detail into something. So I don't spoil anything that you don't want people to know before they read the book. Can you give the listeners a little overview of what to expect from it?
Yeah! I'm blushing now, but you can't see. I'm wearing a shark onesie. I'm inside the mouth, it's red, so is my face, it's fine. So, The 13th Prince. The 13th Prince is narrated by a character called Jean. Jean is working in what is effectively an accounting or comptroller job in a massive imperial bureaucracy. He is one of the important but unseen cogs that keeps the machinery of empire running. And the story opens with him and his boss, who is a sort of distant cousin of his, who's taken him under his wing, who is scabrous, I would say. He has a facility with swearing that is combined from a number of influences of mine, and then just leaning right into it. He's very sort of like Malcolm Tucker, but fantasy, I would say.
That's exactly the vibe I got. I was like, this is like oldie worldy, thick of it.
But it's like the book contains definitely satirical elements in that it's but it's not a satire in the way that the thick of it is. The satire is softer. But Kostya, his cousin, and Jean discover a plan that bears all the hallmarks of an absolutely terrible idea that is going to cost untold treasure and countless lives and end up doing absolutely nothing helpful for the Empire. And for reasons of their own, they decide that they should find out whose terrible idea this is, and if they can, try and stop it. And that's basically the first chapter, is Jean getting sworn at by his boss, who is in a particularly bad mood. And it would be fair to say things go downhill from there. Structurally, the book is very much... It's in some ways it's a very classic 3-act structure, but it's very deliberately... There's a lot of stuff in the book that's really, really deliberate. So it is supposed to shine a mirror on the idea of like the chosen one in fantasy. So Jean is Gene is hyper intelligent. He's an orphan, and that's where we start with this hyper intelligent orphan. But as I say, to a certain extent, it is a knowing satire of the fantasy genre, whilst also being like a loving homage to it. Um,
Mhm.
I've previously said it's supposed to be like the Black Company meets Suits.
Mhm.
So you have the low violent end of the Black Company with the huge. Like, I love the Black Company, so it has like the huge sweeping imperial bureaucracy, but it also has at its heart a lot of threads that are around familial love, familial affection, and friendship, like
Mhm.
the concept of like filial affection, and so yeah, there's quite a lot going on.
Yes, a lot, a lot.
Yeah.
Um, so something that I asked you before we started recording
Mm,
was I noticed in your bio on your website that you're an accountant,
yeah.
and that was very clear in the book. Either that or you did like really anal amounts of research. So
Yeah.
how did that play into your sort of storytelling?
So I knew from the very start when I after I so the way that I write a novel is I write the first page, and then I stop and I think about what the book is about, what the characters are about, what the motivations
Mm,
are, obstacles, all the sort of thematic concepts that I want to do. Um,
mhm,
I am most interested in fantasy when it has like a rooting in a truth.
mhm,
And the truth that is one of the truths that is very present, like once we move past like the love and the romance and those things, one of the truths that is very present in this book and in the world in which it is set is that um, empires are a structure which funnels money from one place to another place, right?
mhm,
And when you see that in like the modern manifestations of imperialism, whether that's like American cultural imperialism or like the re-expanding like Chinese technocratic imperialism, it's empires exist to funnel money from the outside of the empire to the inside of the empire. And with that flow of commerce comes other things, whether it's
mhm,
external culture or whether it's like mechanisms of control and violence. And that is what like the book is about. And so like having a fantasy that is about like some people have described it to me as like a caper or a buddy cop thing. The
mhm,
fundamentally like one of the key underpinnings of it is there is a massive amount of financial crime that is going on, because the actions of the Imperium and the people that are controlling a cabal inside the Imperium are inherently criminal. Like they are
mhm,
trying to murder their way to more power. But um, when you only have a couple of weapons of your own, um, people are not above criminality themselves. But I've never really been that into like. I mean, I don't mind a thieves guild. I'll go to like Raymond E. Feist magician or whatever, and you've got Jimmy the Hand and like a bit of pickpocketing. Brilliant, interesting.
mhm.
I'm more interested in the big crimes. So there's there's supply chain finance fraud, like heavy amounts of money laundering. There's um, what is basically a medieval version of carousel fraud. There's all sorts of different financial crimes that I'm quite interested in professionally that work their way down into the grime and grit of a
Mm.
fantasy world in which there are snakes that are as long as people that will eat you.
Well, you did it in a very interesting and engaging way because I am not a numbers gal. I'm also not very good at like remembering anything. So it was really interesting to follow along with the characters and to not get lost because I've said this previously in many other uh, interviews with authors of fantasy that I find it very difficult to follow along with stories that are fantastical because if it's not familiar to me, I find it difficult to latch on to what's happening. Um,
Yeah.
so you did a good job of like helping the reader through it without being patronizing, and
Mhm.
also giving some like new concepts that I'd never experienced before. So it was a lot of fun to read. And as I think I emailed you within like there was a lot of time between when I first started reading it and when I actually finished reading it because of this whole project that I've been working on. But I think I remember emailing you almost straight away after reading the first chapter and saying like, "This is great." I really, really enjoyed it. So,
Thank
um,
you. So
thoroughly
I think
recommend.
I think one of the things that helps with Prince as opposed to some of the other fantasy things in terms of like
Mm,
making it accessible for like a non-fantasy reader or like people who aren't so deep into fantasy. It's a very
mm.
small cast. Like
Yeah.
it this is not like a load of people. there are a reasonable amount of speaking parts, but the core character list is 4 or 5 people, and
Yeah.
their interrelationships and their dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one of the things that is sat on top of. I'm really fascinated by Eastern European naming traditions. Like if you make friends with someone who's Polish or Russian, and they'll tell you what their name is, and it'll be like, oh, I'm Asher, and you're like, okay, cool. And then later on, you find out they're like, when you see their name written down, it's Joanna, and you're like, I don't understand how you've gone from Joanna to Asher, and actually. Being allowed to use diminutives and the way that we use names. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
use of names is a really interesting thing in fantasy, right? Like that's like
Mm-hmm.
a classic. Like, oh well, I'm going to use my magic and I found your real name, right? These people have names and roles, but instead of doing it that way, it's they're different. You're different people to, and actually this comes up. This is a thread that comes through a lot of my work. Is that
Mm-hmm.
you play a different role to different people. Sometimes you're like, I'm dad at
Mm-hmm.
home, except when I'm husband, except
Mm-hmm.
when I'm Joel, except when I'm this and that and the other. And you play all these different roles, and they have these different aspects of your personality. And the same is true for these characters. And hopefully that resounds with people, where they're like, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is what their friends call them, and this is who they are to their friends, and this is why their friendship is important.
Mm-hmm. Something I love about you as a writer is how much you give a shit about what you're doing. And I'm not saying that other writers don't, but you clearly think about every tiny bit of detail in a hell of a lot of depth, and I don't know how you do it. And don't get distracted.
Oh,
Or
well, see
do
that.
you?
No, see that's like this is like the thing in, I think it's like the first proper Avengers film where
Mhm.
um he turns to Hulk and he goes, what's your secret? And he's like, my secret is I'm always angry. My secret is I'm always distracted. So
So you're using it to your
yeah, yeah,
advantage. I
yeah. It's
like
basically
it.
I've hyper distracted myself. So as I say, there are themes. There are themes and concepts and techniques and stuff
Mhm.
that run through everything I do. And we'll talk about poetry later probably. I
Mhm.
think I'm just finally finding, you talk to poets and I've found my voice. I think I've actually worked out like what my voice is for poetry, which is really
Mm.
exciting because that's a really powerful thing to be able to like latch onto something.
Mm.
But the things that I'm interested in are the things that I'm interested in, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
things, and you know sometimes it's like real detail thing. Like I love to make up a
Mhm.
monster and make it work, and I
Mhm.
like finance crimes, and I like
Mhm.
real jobs in weird situations, right? So like if people go and try, I've got a science fiction serial on a website called Foo For All, which is a webzine, which I'd really recommend everyone try because I think Kevin's brilliant.
Mhm.
But I literally, as I was writing that serial, there's going to be 30 episodes of it, probably maybe 40, we'll see. But like I've tied it up a bit, and there's
Mhm.
7 out at the moment. But I wrote down a list of jobs, and I was like, I'm going to work these jobs into this. So there is an episode with someone who is an aspiring social influencer, but like she wants to be a social influencer, but it's in
Mhm.
space and she's crap at it. And so like all these different things are like, so yeah, like proper jobs. I'm interested in proper jobs. I don't really
Mhm.
care. Like I will write at some point, I'm sure, like a thing about kings and knights and so on.
Mm.
But I'll take a different spin on it. The 13th Prince is called the 13th Prince partly because there are no, like the number 13 and the word prince just don't appear in like as a combination. So it's a unique title, but it's done in a
Mhm.
really specific way because it's to interrogate the idea of like princehood and terror. Like so, yeah, all these different things, as you say. Like there are threads that run all the way through, and then
Mhm.
there's glitter and sprinkles, and nobody can see
So
my
much
fingers because we're not
glitter.
being videoed. But now we've got Shark doing sprinkle hands.
I love Sprinkle Head Shark. I need that on a
Sprinkle
mug.
hands, Shark. Yeah, it's only going to
I
get worse from here, guys. Keep on, like, buckle in. It's going to get weirder.
This is going to be the quickest, longest show ever.
Yeah.
So before we move on to your other work, so with the 13th Prince, um, have you got plans to sort of extend that story? Are you going to open the world up? Are you going to follow it on? How does that look for you?
Yes. Yes. So the 13th Prince, I have a universe setting in which the 13th Prince exists.
Mhm.
The universe setting is called Galaxies Fallen to Despair. It goes right from Dying Earth science fiction. The 13th Prince is not the last book in my sort of head canon for it,
Mhm.
but my hope is that I will be able to develop that out into a what is currently planned to be a 3-book series called The Office of Unconventional Warfare. And the sequels that are tentatively titled The 17th Clerk and The Third Interregnum.
Cool.
And when you finish the 13th Prince, you will know what those things mean. You will have like a bit of a warning about what might be coming.
Excellent. So are they things that you've started or things that are just in your head ready to come out?
Great question. So I've got about 10,000 words of 17th Clerk written. It's probably going to be a 4-act structure. It'll be like, I think it's going to be 2 within 2. I started writing Prince in 2016, and it took me like 3.5. No, it took me like 7 years to write. Right, which when we talk about like writing speed now is going to be wildly different. But the thing that was really challenging was stitching the crimes together. You got to have a plot and you got to have an arc, but also the mechanics of the crimes had to work. And so I wrote the first section up to the trigger in Clerk Out, and then I had to work out the crimes, and that has taken me 6 months. But I'm just about to pick it back up again, and I'm pretty confident that I think I've got enough of the skeleton that the next bits will fit together. I have previously written myself into corners, though, so yeah.
So, I mean, by the time this goes out, hopefully you'll be comfortable with what you've got. So, you also have another series. Is the series called The God's Path?
The series is called The God's Paths, yeah. So The God's Paths, again, started as a single page. I wrote down a single page of a monstrous man disturbing domestic tranquility, and turned it into a book that is about the price of past mistakes and post-traumatic stress. But it's a bleak fantasy with... I'm told it's quite violent. Now, I didn't know. I was like, it's a little violent, right? But I have had 3 separate people that I know personally tell me that they could not finish it because it was so violent. And the first book, Path of Pain and Ruin, I thought, to be honest with you, the book is called The Path of Pain and Ruin. The front cover is a skull dipped in bronze and spattered in blood. I did think there were clues there about
just small clues.
little clues, but yeah, it's very influenced by the brilliant podcast series Fall of the Roman Empire, the Patrick Wyman series. Really touching the Mars and Christian Cameron historic fantasy and historic fiction styles, in that it's sort of like Byzantium, Greco. It's 2 fraternal empires, like basically locked in a death struggle, but it's zoomed right in on a single person whose life has been very, very bad, and it's an interstitched thing, which, as it was the first book that I finished writing, was preposterously ambitious because I didn't know what I was doing. But it's stitched in dreams and flashbacks and reverie between her current situation, which is bad and getting much worse, and her previous life, which started off awful and pretty much stayed there. And she basically has this one moment of happiness, which is pretty much at the moment the book starts, when a bad man kicks the door down and things go back to terrible.
I'm convinced. I'm going to read this.
Well, so having written that, I then sat down. So my mum read it. My mum's a big fantasy reader, and she read it, and she was like, one of the things I really like about it is, there's a lot of detail in it, right? And there are a lot of characters that crop up in the past and almost immediately die because she's lived through quite a series of rather horrific wars, and so most of the people that she's ever met are dead. And to be honest with you, that situation really, as I say, only deteriorates in the book. But Mum was like, "Oh yeah, this person was really interesting. I wish I'd just known a little bit more about that." So I thought, just for fun, like, I write a lot of short stories. I'll write a little short story about that character, like how he comes in and out of the life. Now, unfortunately for that character, that short story wasn't particularly long, 600 words, and they were dead again. And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. He's dead." And then I wrote another story about someone else that's on the ship with him at the same time, and it span into this thing where I had like a short novels length short story collection that has this arc that runs through it. And I'm told if you pick it up having not read Path of Pain and Ruin, you read about the first 70% and you're like, these stories are really interesting, but I don't see how they fit together. And then
Mm.
it deliberately turns at a certain point in the
Mhm.
book, like I wrote a story to lock everything together. And then you're
Mhm.
like, oh, this is bad. This is going to be very bad for everyone. And it is. And that book is called Paths to Empire's Ends, and will give you a
Mhm.
sort of a clue as to the situation that the main character of Path of Pain and Ruin finds themselves in at the start of that book.
I I am so in awe. Your brain is incredible, and it's you're just fascinating to listen to. I could literally listen to you talking about this all day, and I bet you could.
I mean, I definitely could. I definitely could. I don't think it'd be a good idea for anyone to subject themselves to that length of time, that length of exposure to what is going on in it. But yeah, no, there's, yeah. But so as I say, I did not mean. I genuinely sat down to write a. What I was trying to write was a 1,000 word short story, and what I wrote
Mm.
was either depending on how you look at it, either a 650 word short story, in which case terrible failure, 65%. Well, not terrible failure, 65%. Got a 2-1, good university degree, get on and get a real job, right? Or viewed through another lens, accidentally wrote a novel.
Mm.
Well done, me.
Yeah. I was gonna clap, but I thought that might be jarring for people. But I'm
Yeah, probably.
imagine I'm
Yeah.
clapping.
Suddenly they're running and they get that pressure. Well, the exciting news about that though, and we haven't talked about this, so this will be completely brand new to you. And actually, I've not
I'm
really
so
talked to anyone
excited.
about this, right? So
Oh.
that world,
Mm-hmm.
God's paths, right? Um, there's quite a lot of like, there's a religious revelation during the books, during
Mm-hmm.
both books actually, so like concurrently smashed together. Um, but when I started marketing, when I say marketing, that's very generous. When I created a social media account to try and like at least post the book cover for Path of Pain and Ruin, I discovered, and I did not know this because I work from home, I'm an accountant, and I
Mm-hmm.
like literally sit in a loft all day thinking about PowerPoint, right? I did not know that there was a thing called book talk, and I certainly didn't know that it was mostly women talking about romance tropes, and some of them are very
Mm-hmm.
disturbing, right? It's
Yep.
for me, some of it's very jarring because I'm like ultra liberal, but I'm also very sheltered. So yeah, okay, if that's what you like, I'm not comfortable. I'm going to drink some water now, right? So found out about book talk, found out about romantasy, found like 1,000 people talking about Sarah J. Maas. Bought the first book, read it, was like, this is just Beauty and the Beast with mediocre sex in it, right? It's not for me. That's fine. People like different things. But it wasn't for me. But I read it, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I don't understand this. And I couldn't. Also, I wasn't selling anything, right? Because I don't know anyone, and no one's ever heard of me. And the book's okay, but like, it's not like a work of unshatterable genius or whatever. And I was like, I
Okay.
wonder if I could write. I wonder if I could write a book that I would be happy writing, that
Mm.
I would be interested in reading, that
Mm.
relied on any of these tropes.
Mm.
Like, and some of them I absolutely couldn't. Like, he's a billionaire rancher. He should probably be, we'll not open that door because it's November and we'll not talk about politics because it'll be jarring in April when people are like, I don't remember that happening. Right. But others of them, I was like, do you know what, actually? Like, because I am interested in tropes and I am interested in subverting them. And we already talked about Prince and about how, like,
Mm-hmm.
satirizing and twisting tropes is an interesting thing for me to think about. And I was like, do you know what? I reckon I could do that. So I already had projects going on, so I just stuck it in my projects
Mm-hmm.
because I've normally got. We'll talk about this later. I've got like 8 tabs open at any one time. Each one has a different project in.
Okay.
Sometimes there are 8 other tabs which have got notes for me to move into the main thing. Right. So I'm normally working on between 4 and 8 things. So I just
Mm-hmm.
started writing it, and I was working on Prince. So I was working on tappy, and I accidentally wrote. I say accidentally. I deliberately sat down to write a romantic fantasy novel set in the
Okay.
same world as um, Path of Pain and Ruin, set in the same world as Path to Empire's End. It,
Okay.
there is the bit which happens in all of my books where I have discovered this is part of it. I think it's to a certain extent it's a product of the writing process that once I know how it finishes, the book speeds up. So there is a reason why 13th Prince has quite a violent peak in the third act. Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, here comes the violence, right? So I wrote a romance book which has a very, very like it's very trope driven in
Mm-hmm.
some ways, but it's also like deeply rooted in the things that I'm interested in fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a violent peak, um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was like, okay, cool, right. And then I went to one of my nephew's birthday parties. He's little, um,
Oh God!
That's the parcel.
Did you
Yeah, yeah,
read the
no,
book at the
yeah, no.
party?
Maybe that's the parcel, right? And I'm sitting there with my sister-in-law complaining that my wife has never read a word that I've written, and this is true, right? There's,
Okay.
I've got 3 novels out. I've got short stories. I've got poetry. I've got creative non-fiction. I've got a review of the um, London Has Fallen, Olympus Has Fallen series on Sword and Sorcery magazine, which is quite in depth about what Sword and Sorcery is, right? Loads. It
Mhm.
basically doesn't matter what you're into. I've definitely written something you could read and go, oh, okay, I get it. Except if you're married to me, at which point you're not interested at all. Yeah. And I was describing to my sister-in-law how I really did need to write a book that I could get Jenny to read, if only I
Uh-huh.
could work out what it was. And I've always taken the mickey a little bit out of her taste in books. And I described the trope arc for the type of books that Jenny really gloms onto on summer holiday. And
Mhm.
then I went home and I was like, sod it, I'm going to write one. So I've just finished the draft for another romance fantasy set in that same universe. So it's
Uh-huh.
same gods, same impetus.
Mhm.
Um, it again, I mean, it's got a really intricate. There's a number of pieces of it that are quite intricate. It's a murder mystery.
Mhm.
It's a murder mystery because this is what Jenny likes, right? There's a war,
Uh-huh.
which is very fancy, right? So I'm like, bam, I write war,
Mhm.
right? It's in a city, and I'm like, I love urban, so that's fine, right? War,
Mhm.
it's in a city. Someone's got just a straight up and down job, and I'm like, policeman, that's a classic. But twist it, lady policeman in a very sexist society,
Lady
and
policeman.
lady police person, lady provost. She's a provost. So it's like, oh yeah, we got a police. There's been a murder. There's a
Uh-huh.
romance, and somehow the war and the murder are interfering with the romance. That's what Jenny likes. Like, oh, it's
Okay.
set in the Spanish Civil War, and there's a tailor and a painter's assistant, and they can't get to. I'm like, And I was like, do you know what? I can actually write that, and I've just finished it. So next year, hopefully, at some point, there will be 2 romantic fantasies out that are they're spicy. They're
Uh-huh.
spicy. They're very violent. When the violence starts, the violence really starts.
Okay.
But they're also like proper fantasy, but they're also romancy. Yeah.
Is it going to appeal to the side of book talk of all the women that like just getting choked out by a man in a mask, or is that going
I
to?
mean, I'm wearing a shark onesie, so let's not go.
So yes.
It's, it's not. I want to be very clear. This is not a fursuit. This is a onesie, and I think it's very important to draw a distinction on those on the internet. Um, I would say it's
I'm
spicy, but
sorry.
it's not kinky. Like I would say
Okay.
this. But for everyone that didn't get to see the video, there, Saf desperately she's wearing a jumper, but also trying to cram herself. Needs bigger
Because I
hands
can't
to try and
cope.
get. She's
I can't
pink.
cope with it's the shark outfit. I can't cope with it.
Like, oh yeah, it's not at all erotic, was it? Oh, all right.
No, it is gaping though.
Look at my giant open mouth.
Oh my gosh, you've been spending too long on book talk.
It came straight off. I was like, well, I don't even have TikTok. It was just that's the
Uh-huh.
worst thing. It was like things from a different social media platform on a social media platform I had that was
Mhm.
it was very. I find social media confusing at the best of times, but it was very confusing.
Social media is an absolute cesspool. It's awful, but it's great as well because
I tell you what,
it's
lot better
allowed
if you're a
this to
straight white
happen.
man. It's a lot better if you're
I
a straight white man.
bet. I
It's
bet. I need to
wonderful.
try that sometime.
Just change your avatar photo to a photo of me. Nobody sexually harasses me.
Nobody sexually harasses me either. Have you seen my profile picture?
You just have to pull a
I
really
am.
silly face. Put sharp ones on.
I already have a silly face. That's my whole vibe is make yourself wildly irritating and unattractive, and then people don't bother you. It's great.
How does
Um,
one go about making themselves that as opposed to just existing in that format? Is the
okay, maybe I'm
is the
just
challenge?
maybe I'm just a gremlin. Leave me alone.
I was born this way. Lady Gaga said I was born this way.
For fuck's sake. Oh my god, I have laughed so much today. We are going to keep getting off topic, but I would like to keep flitting back just
Yep.
occasionally to talk about your writing. So, just sometimes. So you have written novels, you've written poetry, you also have a collection of kids' books, and I'd really, really love for you to talk to us about that.
I would really love to talk to you about the kids' books. They are in. It's like if someone asks you who your favorite kid is, please you shouldn't answer that question. But I love all my projects in different ways, and my kids' books
Mm-hmm.
are super dear to my heart for like really different reasons. Some reasons that are really different to the reasons that I love my like more adult stuff, and other
Okay.
reasons are exactly the same.
Okay.
Like the kids' books are full of like a sort of warm and gentle humour that is the sort of it's the written version of my slightly madcap interpersonal
Mhm.
style. And I have slowed down to talk about this, right? Like all of my books have got jokes in them. All of my books have got humour in them,
Mhm.
and that is the same, right? Um, I want to write about. So I might be writing, Swords and Sorcery, where I have like crazy monsters, or I might be writing about, a lady policewoman person provost who has the magical power to control butterflies, right? But
Mhm.
I'm still trying to write about something that is true,
Mhm.
even when it's cloaked and caked and wrapped in
Yeah. In
fantastical outfits,
fantasy.
right?
Mhm.
And so writing kids' books that are effectively like, well, I mean, most kids' books actually, if you think about it, are fantasy.
Mhm.
Like they're in that sort of space,
Mhm.
but having that sort of sitting down of truth. So the first book that I wrote in the sixth series, it's called like it's set in a little world called the Littlest Kingdom. It's a little kingdom. Um,
Oh.
I know it's just a little kingdom, and the first book is about three sisters. It's called Three Princesses Have an Adventure. It is about three princesses who have an adventure, right? Straight up and down. It's very cozy, very domestic. But the
Mhm.
book is also about like overcoming people's negative expectations of you. Um, it's about sort of inverting like nominative determinism. It's about accepting who you are and embracing it, and actually becoming the best person, best version of yourself, right? So it's like
Mhm.
a kid's book about that.
Mhm.
Um, and then I wrote a book called The Wise Woman and the Voice of the Tree, which is about a wise woman who it's about like the wisest woman in the world, and she
Mhm.
is gardening, and someone starts talking to her up the tree, and it's disturbing her garden. And
Mhm.
that one's about like how hard it is to say sorry, and it's like so all of them are about these like gentle lessons for kids, told in a way that's supposed to be funny and engaging. They're very verbal.
Mhm.
They're designed to sit with your kids and read to your kids because I love sitting with my kids and reading to my kids. You
Mhm.
absolutely can't read. You absolutely can't read my adult books to your kids. Like I have said that to a couple of people. They're like, "Oh, I bought my book. I bought your book, John. I'm going to read it with my." And I'm like, "How old are they at the moment?" And they're like, "9." And I'm like, "Starts off with it's those wankers in." No, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Well, like that's 13th Brit starts with starts with a swear word in like the fourth word, and
Yep.
the Path of Pain and Heroine starts with someone being beaten to death with a frying pan on the first page, and things really go downhill from there. So yeah, but I want you to be able to like. I love to sit and read with the kids, right? There
Mhm.
is a book called The Princess and the Yellow Boy, which is about it's supposed to be about liver transplantation.
Mhm.
My oldest son has a chronic liver disease. He is going to have a liver
Oh.
transplant at some point in the next,
Wow.
hopefully, a couple of years.
Mhm.
But we've been living with that since he was 14 days old, basically as a known thing.
Wow.
But so like writing something that is like accessible, that is about like what like it's about kindness. The book is
Mhm.
about kindness, but it's the underlying thread is about like organ donation and giving something of yourself
Mhm.
selflessly.
Mhm.
And then each of the different covers has like there is like subtle meaning in each of the different colors. There's a so like the Princess and the Yellow Boy has the colors from the Children's Liver Disease Foundation, which is a charity that I'm involved in, as
Mhm.
its sort of like primary principal colors. But there are colors that are around sort of like non-binary acceptance, trans acceptance, like Black Power, like those
Mhm.
when like, and the thing is like so I have writer friends who are trans who see the covers and they're like, oh, that's interesting, I see that straight away, because
Mhm.
when you're primed in your native visual language is that thing, you're like, hold on a minute, I've seen that blue, pink and white before in a different context, and I'm
Mm.
looking at these three princesses and one of them is not like the others, and
Mm.
why is that? So it has that in without, you don't need to beat people over the head with messaging. Like, I said
Yeah.
earlier about 13th Prince. 13th Prince is about the voraciousness of imperialism.
Mhm.
I don't need to be at the start. The Empire's really bad, they're voracious. I can just show you that the Empire's voracious and it's a vile thing. And there are religious,
Yeah.
like, there are, like, there are, like, Jean Kostya are incredibly religious men whose faith and family are very important to them, and it
Mm-hmm.
leads them to behave in a certain way. There are other people whose have like similar faiths or different faiths whose faith leads them to behave in absolutely outrageous ways, and that's not about the nature of religion, because you can read any like bad left-wing science fiction or fantasy book and be like, "Oh, religion's terrible." Religion's not terrible. People are terrible. I mean, maybe that's why.
Yes.
Like some people are terrible people,
Yeah.
but like it does. Like a terrible person can come up with any reason they want to behave terribly.
Mm-hmm.
But also, coming back to the kids' books, people are kind and people are good and people are loving and people are
Mm-hmm.
open to doing those things. And I think saying that to kids about themselves is really important. So that's what those books are about. They're also, the first three are available on Audible. I will get around to doing the next three. I narrate them. There's a barbarian in it called the Magnificent Steve. He is so magnificent that you have to say his voice like this: "The Magnificent Steve!" Believe me when I say, his
That's
name appears quite a lot.
amazing.
And yeah, his son is called the Magnificent Steve Jr. That book is all about uh, the importance of kind parenting and listening to each other. It's very sweet, but that one's in some ways the most like my Swords and Sorcery because there's a shed load of monsters in it too.
I bet your kids have the best time with you.
No, they get really tired of you. 10-year-old and a 9-year-old. I'm embarrassing. I'm definitely embarrassing at this point.
I mean, maybe, but also very cool. No, I love that, and I think you made a really good point about being able to give people a message without shoving it down their throat, because that's how you start opening conversations about okay, why and what and how, rather than being like, oh, I can't relate to this in any way. And I think it's good to be able to give people the opportunity to relate to it without questioning too much, especially kids when they're just figuring out what's going on.
Yeah.
And I love that. Did you write them for your kids or because you
Yeah.
have children?
No, I wrote them initially. Like I wrote the first couple deliberately so I could read something with my kids that I'd written. And then I was like, well, hold on, I've got two.
Mm-hmm.
What if I wrote three? And then I wrote three and put them out as like a paperback bundle. You can get them on Amazon as like they're on KU, so you can literally just get them, read them to your kids on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can get the paperback which has got all three, or you can get the Audible. If you email me and ask me very nicely, I'll send you an Audible free redemption code. You never know. And then the next three I wrote like much more purposefully, having learned how to write the way that I wanted to write.
That's really, really cool. That's really cool.
See how I'm much calmer when I'm talking about children. I'm going to go back to being mental now. Check it out.
That was a really interesting transition of energy because you clearly were like very, very intentional about your message about the kids' books and the subjects and why you chose them, and then you go back onto your fantasy stuff or the things that like your short stories and your poetry, and it sounds like the inside of your brain when you're talking. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I am like that's the thing, right? So like I'm very intentional with everything that I do.
Yeah.
But it's the energy. The energy I think is the point, right? So like sometimes like I actively write at least one poem a week. And part of why I'm doing that is that I like to experiment with structure and form. So I'm using more the puzzle making part of my brain.
Yeah.
Like I'm working like if I'm writing a ghazal or I'm writing a sair or I'm writing a pandrum, I'm thinking about like, or even like haiku, I'm thinking about okay, well, how does the structure of this work to tell the story? Whereas when I'm in a space that's much freer, because nobody like I might get a small press to publish my Swords and Sorcery, but it's Swords and Sorcery is a tiny genre, so it's probably going to be published by me or like a really niche. There's no constraint over okay, well this chapter, all the chapters have to be the same length, and actually the Swords and Sorcery novel I finished that's sort of steeping. Some of the chapters are 500 words long, and the penultimate chapter is 8,000 words long. Like, but it's like that for a reason. Like there's a reason in the story why it's shaped like that, but it doesn't have to be 575. But kids' books require a much more structured degree of intentionality around them because your linguistic choices are much more limited. Like the palette that you have to play with is much more limited, but also that doesn't mean if that is actually in some ways harder because you can't just chuck in something loose because you don't have space and they won't get it anyway. So you've just wasted space and you've wasted words and you've not, so you might as well like work out a good joke to put in and do a good joke.
I mean, it's very restrictive, but I think that's kind of the beauty of being an indie author is
Mm.
that you have far fewer restrictions with almost everything that you do. So you can choose your own cover, you can choose
Yeah.
your own structure, you can choose whether or not you have classic elements or whether or not you have a prologue. Because I know some people have a weird bug up their ass
There's a
about
whole thing.
prologues,
There's a
and
whole thing about prologues. So like, one of my
yeah.
favorite indie books. I'm actually going to plug someone else's book for a minute. One of my favorite indie books is a book
Mm-hmm.
called The Erstwhile Tyler Kyle,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely superb. And there is absolutely
Mm-hmm.
no way a mainstream publisher would have published it. Like
Mm-hmm.
no way, because it's too risque and it's too
Okay.
niche. Even though I think actually, like I am definitely not the intended audience for it,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't really read horror and it's a horror book,
Mm-hmm.
and um, I don't care that much about internet culture, and there's an element of it that is about like the reflexiveness of internet culture and how that
Mm-hmm.
feeds into horror that I don't like. I'm not an expert and I don't really understand, and it's super
Mm-hmm.
gay. Um, I think it's superb. So the people that
Mm-hmm.
it is actually like written with in mind will
Mm-hmm.
love that book,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it should be better known. Like I think Steve's a wonderful author. That's written by a guy called Steve Hugh Westmore. I think he's a brilliant author. I think he's got an amazing facility with prose. I think he writes like really fluidly. But
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that he's writing about, you know, are going to always suffer from the well. It doesn't. Well, what does it look like? Well, it's
Mm-hmm.
not exactly like oh well. It's not a noun of nouns like
Mm-hmm.
a hatful of masks, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. That's the latest, like, if you can't put it into those niches, then
Mm-hmm.
mainstream's not going to be interested in it. But actually, that's where the vibrancy is, and that's where some of the most interesting things are.
But that's when things become cult classics, is when it was kind of ignored by the mainstream, and then 20 years later
Mhm.
you find this group of people that finally get together and they're like, no, that thing was really great. What was
Yeah,
the name of the book again?
the erstwhile Tyler. Hang on, now I'm getting it wrong. It's TATK. The erstwhile Tyler Kyle. Yeah, the erstwhile Tyler Kyle. See, I was getting tongue twisted there.
Okay, I'm gonna check it out because that sounds amazing.
Honestly,
um
I think that book's brilliant. I think that book's brilliant. Like,
I trust your taste, so I'm gonna give it a go. So we've talked about your sort of novels that are already out now and your
yeah.
kids' books. We
Mhm.
touched a little bit on your poetry, but you said that you try and write a piece of poetry. Did you say every day or every week?
I try. Well, my rule is that I write one a week, at least one a week,
Okay.
and it's realistically it's two. So what I try and do at the moment, I've picked up from I was doing at least one experiment with form, not always
Mm-hmm.
successful, but I would always have one on the go. And at the moment, I'm writing one poem per week. There's a poetry magazine called Rattle who do like a
Mm-hmm.
poets react, so you do like a current affairs thing, right?
Yeah.
Load of fun. So I've actually got one up at the one when we again peek behind the curtain. I was like, oh, I'm just going to open something, right? So, did you see? So this is like in the past, guys. You're hearing conversation in November, but it'll translate a little bit, right? There was
Mm-hmm.
a story like last week or the week before, and the headline for it in the Guardian, English newspaper: DHL cargo plane crashes near Lithuania airport. Right? Apparently, DHL
Mm-hmm.
planes keep crashing in Lithuania. Don't know why. They don't know why either. They're a bit worried the Russians are bombing them. Right?
Oh,
Now,
okay.
yeah, yeah, right. They're like, oh, there was an explosion, but we don't think it was the packaging. You're like, okay, right. So I read that, right, and people will you Saf have already noticed that I've got like a wicked
Mm-hmm.
little imp inside me, right? And I read that, and I was like, I'm reading the paper. Basically, I read the paper at 8 on a Monday morning, and I try and find a story that I write something about for the week. And I saw that, right, and literally my brain just went bing, 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 and it came up with this poem, which I'm going to read for you and for the group,
Oh,
because
thank
it's not
you.
very long, right? Yeah,
Okay.
and the poem
Mm-hmm.
is called "When the Tracking App Proves Less Than Helpful."
Okay.
Right? It's a haiku. When we said drop it, hide it, lose it, we didn't mean the plane.
Again, I would clap, but I don't want to scare people.
I mean,
Imagine them
look,
clapping.
look. The thing is, it is a tragedy, but I literally just was like, oh, if it had been anyone with DHL, I wouldn't have written that, but I couldn't help it. Um, some of them, some of them are less wicked, but I mentioned
Uh-huh.
earlier, like I think I've worked out sort of like where my voice is. Sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
just write an angry poem, and it'll be concrete haiku, a limerick, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Other times I like tear to pieces some of the language from a classic poem, try and reassemble it.
Hmm.
But more and more, I find myself with a very silly title.
Okay.
Sometimes, so yeah, this week's poem is called "Urban Planning Experts Say Cities Only Do This When They're in Extreme Distress."
God, you really remind me of Bill Bailey.
It's got a little bit of that about it. I wrote one a couple of weeks ago
Yeah.
called "The Shoe Thief of Gosho Kodomo in Kindergarten," which is about a weasel who steals shoes. I saw that story and I was like, "Oh, there's a weasel that steals shoes." Other times I'm writing about like, the massacres in Lebanon or like
Hmm.
climate crisis or autism.
Mm.
But sometimes I want to write a funny poem about a weasel who steals shoes, and
I love
that's
that.
yeah. So I'm probably going to put
Nice.
those out next year as a little like chapbook
That's
called
cool.
Untimely
What as a
Poetry. That's a sort of like
in?
retrospective on 2025. I might put it out at the end of the year.
Hmm.
I'm going to have a couple published by someone else, but like, yeah,
Hmm.
probably like a little look back, like what happened in 2025, and there was a weasel that stole shoes, for example, in Japan, which I thought was very funny. Kindergarten shoes as well, so not even big shoes, little shoes.
Oh, tiny shoes. Oh, I love
That
it.
house out of shoes, but only one at a time because a weasel can only carry one shoe at a time.
That's
Good.
very,
There
very
you go.
cute.
So yeah, but yeah, a bit of poetry. I think that was the question. I
Amazing.
don't think it was. Hard to say.
I can't even remember at this point.
So
um,
yeah, Saf's
yeah.
got my link tree. My link tree will have
Mhm.
everything on. It's got my website on. That's got
Yeah.
everything on. There's some secret stuff in the website. If you can sort of like browse around, you can find some stuff. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, crack on. Like, get your Kindles out. Buy and download all my books. Download my short stories, and then just on Kindle Unlimited, just like reel through them over and over again. That's actually I'd make a lot more money if you just clicked page, 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 page.
But
I'd rather you read
slowly.
them. Yeah, yeah,
Slowly, because it picks it
slowly.
up.
But yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, like I'm genuinely always delighted if someone reads a thing that I've written,
Mm.
like anything from a silly haiku about a tragedy, or I have a poem in a journal called Epistemic,
Hmm.
which people can check out, which is about the experience of being bullied. It's about exclusion, which
Hmm.
is apparently it's pretty hard to read. Um,
Hmm.
but I've also got like, yeah, download a kids book about like the dragon that is really terrible at playing hide and seek. You know,
Something for everybody.
there is. I try and write something for everyone. It's because
Hmm.
I am like 1,000 squirrels fighting over a laptop,
Yes,
and
that is
it's
exactly what you're like.
yeah, it's whichever squirrel's driving is the one who's being written for.
What? Okay, something that stands out to me about you as a writer is that
Go on.
um, you. I mean, I've made a couple of jokes and said quite a few times that you write many, many different things, and you've got
Hmm.
your fingers in all of the pies. But you do everything with such passion and care. You can tell by reading it that you are doing it because you really fucking love it, not because you're trying to churn out as much as you possibly can to make money. And that is something that I really want to hammer home to people, is that you might have this plethora of things that are literally you're not kidding, something for everybody. Um you you care and you're passionate,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
just
Well,
wanted
I
to say
suppose
that.
like we'll do a moment of seriousness,
Mm,
which I'm going to be really careful not to do as a humble brag, right? So
okay.
like earlier we mentioned, like I'm an accountant, so I got out of
Mm,
uni. I had like a short, long story short, I had a catastrophic knee injury, which prevented me from doing the thing that I was planning to do after I graduated.
okay.
And so I got a job on a graduate training scheme as an accountant, right?
Mhm,
And it's a they train you. It's pretty well paid.
mhm,
There are aspects of the finance profession that I am absolutely awful at because they require you to be monomaniacal and single stream and
mm,
able to repeat the same set of behaviours over and over again, which
mhm,
is obviously very clear to anybody that's ever met me that that is not my style. Um, but what I have been able to do, and I've been really lucky to have people around me professionally and in my life to support me to do this, is to pick up like loads of weird niche skills
mm,
that are either very daunting to other people, or they're not interesting to other people, or they're daunting and uninteresting.
mhm,
Um, are particularly niche skills that other accountants don't want to possess. Like I really
mm,
like, because of my profound levels of extroversion, I really like being on the stage talking to people about stuff, and most
mhm.
accountants absolutely loathe that. right? I like presenting in I like, but the thing is, if once you reach a certain level of seniority in any profession, you are going to be expected to stand up and explain what it is exactly you've done. And so some people are like, oh, I don't want to get that promotion. Why not? I'm terrified of public speaking. And I'm like, just give me the papers, I'll do it. Right. So I've reached a point in my career where like I'm a chartered accountant. I've been a chartered accountant for more than 10 years. I have a chartered qualification in procurement and supply because I learned how to do buying, right? And I've got an MBA, which is in like where my thesis was in joint venture, like avoiding joint venture defection behaviors in public-private partnerships, right? So it's really fucking niche. And these days I spend a lot of time mucking around PowerPoint. So I'm very lucky, and as I say, I work from home, right? So I'm like in the ideal situation that my job is interesting to me and it's well paid, right? So I'm not an author that is sitting there going, oh well, if I don't make, and this is no shade to those people, right? Like people who have committed themselves to going full time. I have nothing but admiration for it, but it makes your like it can be quite powerless, and I can understand how that changes your incentive structure. My incentive structure for writing is twofold. The first is that I love it, right? And the second is it occupies a part of my brain that would otherwise be deeply invested in worrying about the health of my children. So I come upstairs, I'll write, sometimes I write in the morning, but generally I come upstairs like in the evening, read to the kids, tuck them into bed, try and shape their reading habits in a way that suits me, but I've failed on that, but they've actually still got good taste, so that's fine. And then I will write for a period of time, unless I'm tired. But like when I'm writing, and all of the things that someone else in my situation might be like concocting completely reasonable scenarios where like there's a 1% chance of this bad outcome, or there's a 10% chance of this bad outcome, or what will happen if next week. I use that entire part of my brain to make terrible jokes and come up with ludicrous situations. And I as I've mentioned earlier, there's as I've learned what my process for finishing a book is, there's a point where I really accelerate through the writing, and I go from writing maybe 1,500 words a day to about 3,000 a day that just like punch, 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 punch. And recently, when writing the final act of a book, I was able to write list of people who have to die. And it was an A4 page of the characters in the book that would not be making it to the end. Like, if you were imagining, like, it's quite hard to kill that many people as well. Like, you're like, am I going to kill them two at a time or individually? And I was like, I'm going to kill them individually, one at a time. They coming up with unique deaths for like 25 different people, quite challenging. It's very, very hard to start worrying about, well, what will happen? No, I can't worry about that. I'm trying to work out how this guy's going to die, and it's got to be different. Can't repeat the death unless you're repeating the death because it's funny. Like, are you going to learn anything from the last guy? Like, yeah. See,
So it's a good distraction tool.
It is my version of mindfulness. Like it is used as a like it is. I have found it incredibly helpful as a way of controlling peripheral anxieties and those sorts of things, and really centering myself and grounding myself. And if I'm feeling a certain way, like if I'm feeling real or negativity or anxiety, or any of those kind of like any of the other many reasonable emotions one could feel in any given day, anger. I do a reasonable amount of anger. I will just put that into a thing that requires that emotional energy, and then it's there, and it's there forever. And there are pieces of mine that are very sad and they're sorrowful and like self-righteous and just righteous, and there are pieces that are incredibly silly because you can't be just one emotional state all the time.
Yeah, that would kill you.
I mean, you could give it a go.
Boring as well.
I think the people that are on one constant emotional state all the time are probably mentally ill, one way or another. Like, and it doesn't matter. That's not again. That's no shame. Like, if you are feeling sad every minute of every day of your life, you really need to get some support. If you are feeling jubilant every minute of every day of your life, you need the same amount of support, but you are much less likely to go and find it out.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because people who are sad all the time must know. Oh, I'm like at some point you can have that moment of reflection where you're like, is everybody feeling like this? But maybe if you're jubilant all the time, you're like, I'm really happy. I'm just a happy person. That's mania. That is mania.
I mean, I often probably come across as like a somebody who's like happy and laughing all the time and blah blah blah. But I spend a lot of my time rotting, like on the sofa or sleeping or whatever. So yeah,
Don't get me
I
wrong. Like,
think.
I do a lot of jokes. I'm a profoundly anxious and insecure person.
Mm.
But I've found a really interesting way of harnessing it to make it much more difficult for other people. It's very hard to make me anxious because to make me anxious, you have to be around me.
Well, you I think it's was a healthy coping mechanism, and it's
I've weaponized
constructive.
it.
Yeah, I mean, you can put it like that if you like,
Yeah.
but the thing is that something that's come out of it is something that's really quite beautiful, because it's something that you can share with people and relate to people with, and you, through, even if it doesn't appear at the surface, you're incredibly vulnerable when you're in a place where you've written something and you share it with somebody. So
Oh yeah.
whether it is a silly poem or something that's deeply sad and intimate, it's just as like naked as anything. So
Mm.
you are one of many many writers that I've spoken to that uses writing as a tool, and
Mm.
I think that that's really really cool that you've been able to share it with people and you haven't just kept it to yourself. So I am grateful that you are able to put that out into the world. I think it's a really cool thing because not everybody can do it. I thought I could, but I'm still stuck doing this one thing that I've been trying to do for like a year
Can
now. I might
can I
finish
say,
it next year.
right?
Yeah,
So
go
like,
ahead.
I got stuck on 13th Prince. I got
Uh-huh.
properly stuck. Right, it
Mhm.
slowed and slowed, and I thought it was another project because I've been trying to write a novel since like 2005. Right, like
Oh
in
wow.
one way or
Okay.
another, I've been trying to write something
Mhm.
since 2005. Right, and I got properly stuck. And I was like, oh, it's happened again, right? So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to write something different, right?
Mhm.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to have both, but like, I'm going to write something stylistically very different, right? And that's what I started with Path of Pain and Ruin. I started with a page, and I was like, One of the things I was going to inject in it, deliberately injected into it, was like, it's got to be less chatty, because
Mhm.
like Prince is chatty and it's intricate, and its first act is very closed because it
Mhm.
allows you to expand out after, right?
Mhm.
And I was like, I'm going to put something really kinetic in, like the magic from Mistborn. I want to have, like, if you read Mistborn and you go to that series, it's like, he pushes and he pulls and he does this and he does that, right? So when I
Mhm.
created the theocratic magic system that's in Path of Pain and Ruin, which fuels so much now of the world that it's set in,
Mhm.
um, I wanted it to have that like visceral, kinetic speed, which would help me to write because there's like the action sequences in like the action in Prince is a long time coming. I was like, I just want to
Mhm.
get straight to the murdering, right? And I want it to be like super violent, like but
Mhm.
like hectic, pell mell. Well, I want to write like an action film where they drop you in the middle, right? So I started
Mhm.
writing it. Now it is important to say I wrote the first ad, really pleased with it. Wrote the next 3 chapters, realised I'd written myself into a hole. It took me absolutely months to dig myself back out of it. I had to work out why it had gone wrong. It took
Mhm.
months. I literally couldn't write words because I was like, the writing was okay, but the plot had just fallen to pieces because I don't plan.
Mhm.
Like I knew what the ending was, but I was like, I cannot
Yeah.
get to the. I'd taken a wrong turning basically, so like I just left myself in some cul-de-sac somewhere. Like I can't get to the ending from here, and I don't know why. And then I
Uh-huh.
worked out that I got the wrong antagonist, and then it like reversed out of the cul-de-sac and set back down the main road. Right,
Hmm.
but so having two things that were spiritually very different really helped me
Mhm.
because like once they were both back on track, if I was like time for some violence, I could just write like I could write a scene um in Path, which goes backwards and forwards, and be like, oh, it's
Mhm.
time for some violent scenes. Um, Also, Path of Pain and Ruin, when you get to it, every chapter title. So, 13th Prince is chapter
Mhm.
1, chapter 2, chapter 3, right?
Yeah.
Fine. Path of Pain and Ruin has a chapter title. Every word is a word to do with flame, which is an important concept that runs through the book.
Mhm.
If you and so there's some really niche words in there because there's a lot of chapters. They are a subtle hint. Each chapter title is a subtle foreshadowing of what happens in the book in the that chapter. So
Interesting.
there's like so you're thinking so you get the words and then you think okay well how am I going to fit all these together and there were words left on the cutting room floor because there's plenty of words about like setting things on fire. But others you're like and also like there's words about fire you can't use in a fantasy book. Like if you put the word Holocaust in, it means something very specific. It got a different cultural threat added to it. Now you can't use it unless you're talking about a very specific thing. Totally fine. But when you're going through your synonym list, you're like, Well, that one's no
Mm.
use. Cross that one out.
Mm.
But then you have to find new words like clinker, and I'm like, no, put clinker in, and we're going to find out who knows what that means. Um,
I don't
but
know
yeah,
what that means.
well, there you go. You see, but yeah, so like, I would say to you, if you're completely
Mm.
stuck, that,
Mm.
don't just sit there staring at the thing and go, well, I'm stuck. I must be a shit writer. No,
That's what I'm
open three more
doing.
things. Open three more things. Have just like open your ideas pad,
Mm.
your 12-page long ideas pad that everyone has, right?
Yeah.
Take one of the ideas off it and go, I'm going to try and write. I've got these two sentences. I'm going to smash them together. I'm going to write a science fiction story about frogs. I don't know. Like, I mean that I wouldn't put that past me actually. The whole science, the Cavendish, the oral history of Cavendish Corporation is basically about my obsession with carcinisation, which is crabs. Fascinating.
Which is crabs.
Crabs. Right. So carcinisation. Right. So we're going to. Right. This is brilliant. Right.
Yeah, I
Crabs.
know. I have to know this now,
Right.
please.
Crabs have evolved on Earth like 5 different times independently of each other. Right? If you put amoeba in salt water and subject them to evolutionary pressure, at some point nature goes, do you know what you need? 8 legs, hard shell, pinchy, pinchy, pinchy. Right?
I thought you meant pubic lice for a
No!
minute.
Proper crabs!
Proper crabs, not those fake crabs.
Little crabs, king crabs. And the same is true, actually, weirdly. The same is true in Silicon Valley. If you give a Silicon Valley firm enough money and subject it to enough pressure, they invent trains. It's the same thing because, like, they're like, oh, we've thought about what about a system where there's transport and you can get it all together, and maybe we'll set it on a structure and its utility. Yeah, that's a train. Well done, lads. We can call it group cars. No, that's a train, boys. But the same is true of crabs, right? Crabs are basically nature's perfect invention, and they're so perfect that nature keeps inventing them. Like, and it's like, oh yeah,
Well,
deep in the ocean, we need something to move around. Have you thought about 8 legs, hard shell, pinchy, pinchy, pinchy? You know, have you got any ideas? And Mother Nature goes, no. And I think as a concept, what I basically, so I've got this idea, it's rolling around my head. I thought what would be really interesting is, what if on every other planet on which intelligent life exists,
mhm.
it's crabs? They're all different, but basically they meet each other from different places and they're like, I know you. Mother Nature's perfect answer. And then they discover human beings and they're like, what the fuck is going on with you? And they're like, they're intelligent, they can solve all the problems, but they're looking at people like, you've got to stop eating the crabs. That's messed up. Like, you can't have a buffet full of crab. So basically, that's where the idea came from. So it's a really silly idea. Well, it's not
That's
silly.
great.
Right, but it's like it's bonkers. And so I started off with 2 stories. One is about the announcement of the discovery of extraterrestrial life that ends. It's called the story's called The Announcement, that ends with them announcing that they've discovered and then the other story is about someone who's had a terrible industrial accident, because I have discovered I love writing about industrial accidents. It doesn't matter how funny the subject matter is supposed to be. I'm like, and then what I said earlier about like 12 people to kill. Some of them die in industrial accidents.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, how's he going to die? Oh, well, there might be a crab involved or an industrial accident. This is Joel's work we're talking about.
That if I ever make a trailer for this podcast, it's gonna be is it an industrial accident or crabs?
Yeah, that's fine.
Use that as a strapline. It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
I don't want to sort of lose out on the opportunity to talk about your success over 2024 because you've released quite a lot of stuff. Would you be willing to let us in on the sort of total numbers?
Yeah, I'll do the real. Right,
I'd love to know.
Right. So, 2024 year in review in November. No, it's December now, but like, there's broad strokes. Novels published 2. Right.
Amazing.
Novels written 4. That's not including the other 2. So hopefully we'll see those in the not too distant future at some way, shape, or form. Kids' books written, published 6. Audiobooks recorded 3.
Amazing.
I've definitely written more than 50 short stories. Not including in that 50 is the 31 episodes of the oral history of the Cavendish Mining Company, 7 of which are already on Food for All, and Kevin's got all 30. So by the time you get to them in April, they're coming out once or twice a month, so there'll be a backlog there that you can read.
Cool.
They are written so that until you get into the third act of the storytelling, you can read them in any order and they will make sense.
Okay.
And you will find Easter eggs and threads all the way through them. Like, it yo-yos backwards and forwards between Earth and it's very much about capitalism, and it's classic. It's classic sci-fi. It's a bit like it's not dissimilar to The Expanse or like Deep Space Nine. It's very influenced by those sorts of things. Yeah, I had a story published in Nature, which I was very pleased with. I've had 6 poems published, some creative non-fiction, an essay on swords and sorcery. I got a review published in a magazine called The Drift. I'm hoping for another one before the end of the year. Yeah, more than, I've done some more submissions actually since I wrote this. More than 300 pieces submitted to various places. More than 200 rejections.
Those are pretty good odds, actually.
Oh yeah, no, no. It's not like I'm not getting a third of my stuff published. I'm just waiting on the other 100.
I don't know. I still think it's pretty good odds. It's a harsh world out there, man.
It is a harsh world out there.
I think it's a very good character building exercise for a lot of people to just embrace the rejections.
Because a lot of the sort of smaller to mid-size mags are North American in some way, shape, or form. Like Love the Canadians or American, right? And they're done as like part-time gigs or hobby gigs. I know they hate it when you say it like that, right? So people are generally doing the reading and the catching up and the thinking about what they want to include in their publications, either on a Friday night or a Saturday. Which means that as an Englishman, I wake up on a Sunday morning pretty much every week to at least 3 emails telling me, oh yeah, no, we're not publishing this, and that is absolutely fucking dreadful.
Like, I bet.
Because I am 42 years old, right? So I wake up and I think, oh god, I don't want to get out of bed, and then I think, I know what I'll do. I'll look at my phone. That'll definitely help. It does not help at all. I get an email which basically my internal monologue reads as, your writing is shit and you're not good enough, and then I have to get up and find the coffee. So yeah, I actually have had an acceptance on a Sunday morning, and it took me so long to get my head around it because I read the first sentence and I was like, I don't really understand what this email's about. I'm gonna have to go back to the beginning. So yeah, it's unpleasant. I really wouldn't recommend it to anybody that doesn't want to get their ego really
pummeled.
put into quite a nice square box. Fortunately, I have like an outer layer of ego that is very robust compared to my inner tiny. I'm like an
gentle
egg,
soul.
basically. Yeah,
You're an egg.
I'm egg shaped. Yeah,
you're shark shaped today.
I'm shark shaped
today.
Egg. Actually, I'll tell you something. This is a true story, right? It's a true story. Where my oldest son, he was 10 at the time, gives me a big hug, and he said, he gave me this huge hug. It was so nice. It was really out of the blue. And he said to me, I love you, Daddy. We're a pair. And I was like, oh, that's so nice. And then he took half a step back and said, well, you're pear-shaped. And then he just walked off.
Oh, what a shit.
That's what I have to deal with every day.
I don't think I could be a parent because I'm not ready to be humbled like that.
He put me back in my place.
Oh my god.
I've been grey and bold since I was 20, so it's really not that. They're like, you're bold, and I'm like, mate, I've been bold since like for so long. Like, I have had the haircut that I have. He says, revealing the head for a moment. Right, I've had this haircut for like twice as long as my oldest child has been alive. Like, telling me what the heck of that, like, it's not a revelation, buddy. This used to be a choice.
Big man.
This is going to happen to you little fucker.
Have you threatened them with the genetics card?
No, I just threatened to shave them while they're sleeping.
Fuck.
I said to you earlier, like, just as another, peek behind the curtain, I went to an 11-year-old's roller skate birthday party today. It was miserable. And at the end, I was teasing one of the kids, and I threatened to, I was being mean to him. I said I was going to put him in the bin. He's not very big. And he gets on escalate, and I finished by telling him I was going to steal all his Christmas presents, spend the next month taking shits in a box, and then replace his Christmas presents with an entire month full of boxes of my shit, nicely wrapped, so that each time he opened it, he was like, this is going to be an amazing present, but instead found increasingly worse versions of my poo.
Did you know the kid beforehand?
Oh yeah, I know all the kids. They know me. They're like,
Just
that's the
some
crazy one.
random
I'm like, yeah,
stranger.
I'm taking your presents. Yeah, get
I'm
me
gonna.
blue.
Fuck's sake.
I mean, I
I.
immediately spoke to his mum afterwards and was like, whatever he says, I said. I didn't.
So evil. Oh, I'm disappointed that it wasn't a good party. It sounded like it could
I
have
mean,
been a
every
good
party that I
thing.
attend is a good party, but, for different reasons.
I believe that. So you have as I've kind of already reflected on, a wide range of things. Is there anything that we haven't already talked about that you'd love for our listeners to hear about?
Yes, thank you for asking. I have got so everything that I'm writing exists in its own little worlds. That
Mhm,
is pretty much the similarity between me and Brandon Sanderson. Pretty much starts and finishes with the different worlds that we write in. He's successful and famous, and I am not.
You
He's
both have a beard.
uh, yeah, and it's not the same sort of bid. I'm going to draw
Oh,
a line there.
okay.
It's not the same sort of bid. But yeah,
Okay, fine.
me and Sando, bosom buddies that we are. But yes,
Oh.
so I have a swords and sorcery world, which is called Nine Realms of Reality.
Mhm,
Um, there is available for free to read in a collection called Villa Deati, which is a collection of horror stories. A short story about how difficult it is to have a relationship with your mother if you're a necromancer. And I think it's funny. So it's a
sounds
horror because
amazing.
it's a ghost story, but like it's
Okay.
also supposed to be funny and
Mhm,
also quite crazy. That will give people like a flavour for what that world is like. There is
mhm,
also a novelette set in that world called A Many Winged Retreat, um,
mhm,
which is about a bounty hunter for whom, like the first bounty in the story,
mhm.
does not go according to plan. When I mentioned earlier that there are themes, there is a thing, and things go downhill from there. It is
Okay.
definitely a Many Winged Retreat definitely fits into the shape of a thing happens and things sort of go downhill from there. Um,
Okay.
but it's quite arch. It's silly but like reverent for the genre.
Mhm,
It is quite arch. There's a talking sword. The sword is an egomaniac and is
mhm,
one of my favourite characters. Having written a couple of short stories in that world, there is a novel coming hopefully next year, which is called
mhm.
Nine Realms of Reality, which has this arc
Okay.
in it which is about filial and familial love and broken
Oh.
hearts and romance and the meaning of names in fantasy, which is a thing literally that I've said 4 times during this podcast. So it is about those things, but
Okay.
it's wildly different. It's like Avengers Assemble, but swords and sorcery, and it is completely demented. It is the most demented thing that I've written. But to get tastes of that ahead of time,
Mhm.
if people wanted to try a Many Winged Retreat, they can do. It's out with a small press called Grendel, so you can get it straight from their website or on Amazon in
Amazing.
electronic form only, and you can get the free one on via my website. There's links on it. I think
Mhm.
Saf probably has the links for that, and I
Yeah.
think I have written a short story specifically for Saf's website that is set in the same world as that. That like, um, yeah, that's
Amazing.
yeah. So like because Saf said to me, "Oh, what are you going to put on here?" And I was like, "I'll put some stuff on." So like, yeah, there are a few short stories knocking around that are set in that world.
Mhm,
The important things to know about it are that it's a dying Earth fantasy. So basically, the world is massive and nothing works. There is technology that no one can get to work, and every single race that you can possibly think of that you've ever come across in fantasy is there, plus an entire other ecosystem of other stuff that sits around it. Because the place is so broken, there are a lot of dinosaurs. Because I think dinosaurs are brilliant in fantasy. There are like
mhm.
cassowaries and man-eating birds. There are giant ants. There's every type of god, myth. Everything is basically just smashed together in this world, slowly dying together. Um,
Wow.
and added to that, you've got a sociopathic talking sword and a barbarian mercenary who really doesn't want anything to do with the situation she's ended up in.
I expect nothing less from you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Same themes. Oh, really, really, Joel. There's a story about a challenging interpersonal relationship, and things go downhill from there. Are there any monsters? Yes, there are. At some point in the final third of the book, does the pace accelerate somewhat? Is there an industrial accident? And do any of the named characters finish the book. The real way to tell how many characters, like, whether you should set the over under at 1 or not for characters who finish my book alive, is whether the book is told in the first or third person. Because if it's told in the first person, it is very difficult to get to the end and have killed all of the named characters. Although Mark Lawrence does an excellent job of it in Prince of Thorns. But some of my books switch between viewpoints. Path to Empire's End is in first, second, and third, so there's no guarantee.
I am just trying to get my head around the guest appearance of Boris Johnson just then. You just sounded just like Boris Johnson.
Yes, well, when you've worked in the public sector as long as I have, Saffron, you do learn to do posh people quite well.
I was like, what the fuck? Are you going to tell me that a Scotch egg is a meal? Oh my gosh. I will put the link to your website on the description of the episode, and also your author feature will be live by the time this goes out on indiosyncrasy.com, so that I have links to all of your works. And I can't remember off the top of my head when your week on the front pages, but you'll be able to see Joel's lovely stuff and his face all over the front page at some point. Do you? Oh, you've got better memory than me.
Well, it's not hard. Right. No, not for that reason, but for the other reason. So this podcast is due to come out the week of April the 5th. My original set date that Slav gave me is in the past when you were listening to this. It was due to be March the 5th, which is the week of my birthday. So.
Oh, that was right. Yes.
So
happy birthday.
If you are listening to this in the week of April the 5th, you have missed my featured month and my special day by a featured week and my special day by an entire month. Shame on you. Go back and buy a book for my birthday, because that is the sort of thing that good people do.
That is exactly. Just to apologise to Joel, just go buy one of his books. Because they're great.
Or 3 or 4.
All of them. Just a collection.
Just go on Amazon, click Joel Glover. The kids' books have got a little umlaut over the name to try and distinguish them slightly so that people don't get confused. They're like, is this Joel Glover the same as Joel Glover? Yes, he is. But one of the books has more swearing and murdering other than the other 6.
I think it would be really... It's easy to tell by looking at the covers which ones are for the children. Yeah. I just like to point that out. You're not going to accidentally read the wrong book to your kids. Anyway, before this falls off a cliff, I'm going to do the closure for the episode. So as well as having the links to all of your various social media things and your website are at the bottom of in the description of the episode, would you be able to tell our listeners where to find you and your work?
Yes, you should look me up on Twitter, which is at Books After Bed, because that started off as reviewing the kids' books I just read to my children whilst they fell asleep on top of me. So that's why it's called that. Or on Joel Glover Author on either Instagram or Blue Sky, where by April I should be a bit more active on those spaces. Or if you type in Joel Glover Author into Amazon or Google, I will come up because there are 2 Joel Glovers who are authors. One of them writes a lot of strange books about hunting and trapping in the American Deep South, but I'm gradually dislodging him from the algorithm. He is Joel D. Glover, D for demoted in the algorithm. Yeah, there you go.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today, and I'm really, really grateful that you took a chance on this random person from the internet. So hopefully we'll have you on again soon. We've got plenty of material, so I'm sure if at any point I need another episode fill-in, I'm going to give you a call.
Yeah, people are going to drop out. They're going to be like, oh God, it's a bit high risk going on that. Have you heard about the lunatic in the shark costume? And I'll be like, guess who's back to do? Guess who's back to do? It's me, the podcast shark.
I really hope we have the video sorted by that time, because I feel like everybody's sorely missed out. I did take a screenshot, and we're going to use that for the promo stuff. But yeah, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll have you back again.
No, thank you, mate. Really appreciate it. Okay.